crappy Black Sabbath boob tube. I'm back with more stuff. Was this 3 or 4 days in a row now? I'm in a good mood because the pool is filling right now. Today's crappy weather, but tomorrow it's supposed to get up above 20 and stay that way for a while, so life is looking good right now. Let's get started with the next batch of stuff I've done. First up, this book was awesome. As you should know by now, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and when the prequels came out back in the late 90s, when that whole thing started, when I went to see The Phantom Menace, I was over the moon to see a new Star Wars movie in the theaters, and then once I saw the movie, I was even more excited because it was awesome. All the new characters, like a young Obi-Wan, his master Qui-Gon, seeing how Palpatine was playing both sides with those two different personas, and his underling Darth Maul, one of the greatest new characters in that prequel trilogy. The whole story was amazing, but there's so much more to be had, and I've read a lot of books surrounding the prequels and the Clone Wars specifically that's fleshed a lot of the characters out more than you see in the movies. And one of the characters that I felt hasn't got enough of his due is Qui-Gon Jinn. He's only in the one movie, the Phantom Menace, and he dies at the end of it. But he's got this big presence. You know that there's more to this character than just that one appearance in that movie. He's more important than that. So this book surrounds him and his relationship with Obi-Wan, and it is called Master and Apprentice. As this book starts up, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are just getting back from a mission to Teth, where they get involved with some hut business that is causing some trouble. And when they get back from that mission, Qui-Gon is actually offered a spot on the Jedi Council from one master is I don't know, retiring or whatever they do eventually when they get too old. So Qui-Gon is like, oh, didn't see that one coming. So he's like, can I have some time to think about this? And so he does. And he's not sure. He's pretty sure that he's going to take it because he feels like he's failed as a master, because Obi-Wan is so by the book. The council's word is law. And Qui-Gon, on the other hand, is more... he puts up a fight against the council and sees things in a different way from them a lot of the times, and he lets the Force kind of just guide him and do what it will in whatever direction it kind of takes him, whether it's follows the Jedi Order's mandate or not. He allows kind of the living Force, as he mentions it in the movie, I guess, kind of guide him in his actions. So he's kind of more outside the box than the standard cookie cutter kind of Jedi. So like I said, he's feeling like he's gonna take the spot, but he doesn't know just yet. He doesn't tell Obi-Wan because he doesn't want to stress the relationship anymore. But soon enough, the pair are requested specifically for a mission to a planet called Pijal. They're requested specifically by a Jedi Master who's already on the planet, named Rael Averross. And as they're preparing for this mission, and they meet with the current Chancellor at the time, whose term is just about to come to an end, Chancellor Kaj, she lets it slip that Qui-Gon has been offered this spot on the Jedi Council, and Obi-Wan's like, what? You didn't even tell me? Like, oh, I guess this is over, right? So he's feeling like a failure already, and then he finds out that Qui-Gon's probably not going to be his master anymore because he's been offered this position and didn't even have, the respect enough to tell him about it, right? So they go on this mission, and their relationship, of course, is strained. And the situation on Pijal is that the other Jedi, Rael Averross, has been ruling the planet for about 8 years, waiting for the young queen to come of age before she has her coronation. This young queen, Fanry, she, when she does come of age and she is coronated, she's also going to sign a treaty that is going to establish a new hyperlane corridor in that sector, which is very important for transport of goods and all sorts of agreements between different interests and stuff like that. So it's a big deal. Involved in this is a company called Sazurka Corporation, I guess, and they've been around for as long as anybody can remember, and are huge. But the one downside to them is that they do use slave labor, but they're so big that they're overlooked in that regard, I guess. So there's all these different factors going on, and what's happened is that there has been this resistance called the opposition that is trying to stop this treaty from happening, because when the treaty does happen, Sazerka is going to have basically way more power than they already have in the system. So Rael Averos feels like he is too close to the situation and he can't quite ferret out who this opposition is, what they want, and how to stop them. So he thinks a fresh perspective may help shed some light on the matter. So, and Qui-Gon being a more outside the box, kind of like Rael is, he thinks he's the perfect guy to do the job. So the rest of the story is just Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan kind of adventuring. They run into this pair of jewel thieves that kind of help them along after being coerced a little, and they eventually ferret out the issue, and there's some twists and turns along the way, of course, but the main thing is that we get to see Qui-Gon in more action than we do in the Phantom Menace, and also how him and Obi-Wan's kind of evolving apprenticeship came along, right? Because in the movie they're basically working perfectly in sync and stuff like that, and you wouldn't think they ever had issues, but this kind of touches on the fact that they were very two different kind of Jedi in the beginning, but were able to work through some stuff to become what we did see in the Phantom Menace. So this was a really good read. I really enjoyed it. Next up, another Marvel animated adventure called The Astonishing XMen, Gifted. Just like with Iron Man Extremis, I read a book on this story a few years back, probably. So I was familiar with the story already, although I had kind of forgotten most of it by the time I watched this. So basically, as this starts off, Kitty Pryde is coming back to the X Mansion because there has been kind of a recent change there. Professor X is away on a sabbatical, so running things at the mansion is a tag team duo of Emma Frost and Scott Summers, otherwise known as Cyclops. So they're kind of holding a little ceremony to all the students at the mansion, saying how the following year is going to kind of break down, with them kind of leading the charge, and then the rest of the staff, their teachers, rounding out as Wolverine, who's not at the ceremony, Kitty Pryde, otherwise known as Shadowcat, and of course Hank McCoy, otherwise known as Beast. So it's those five that will be running things around the X Mansion, and later on, after the ceremony's over, Wolverine does finally show up, and him and Scott Summers get into it and start fighting each other over the recently deceased Jean Grey, because they both had strong feelings for her, and eventually it's broken up, but not before all the students see this going on, and it obviously causes some rumors and some other stuff going around the mansion. So afterwards, Scott Summers brings the team together, and he says, you know what, we can't let that happen again. We have to become a better team, like the X-Men, they are the X-Men, like the Avengers, like the Fantastic Four, and also in order to be more like a team, we need uniforms. So they try to come together, they get their new uniforms, and soon enough they're called away on a mission to subvert a hostage crisis, I guess. While that's going on, sorry, tired. There's a big announcement being put out on the airwaves by a geneticist, I guess, named Dr. Rael. She has been working with a young mutant for the last while, and has finally successfully been able to single out the mutation gene or the gene, or whatever happens to the genes that causes mutations, and also in identifying it, also now is able to reverse it. So this sends out ripples of crazed shockwaves throughout the mutant cosmos, in two different, totally distinct categories. Mutants that hate the changes that the mutations have caused to their bodies are like, yes, and they line up outside the laboratory long before a mass antidote or whatever you want to call it can be synthesized. They just want it over with, and they're willing to do anything to get rid of their mutation. Whereas you have the other mutants who love their powers and see it not as an abomination, and they're disgusted that by the fact that there has been a cure has been found for it. So there's all this kind of everything's up in the air between these two camps, right? Nobody knows what to think of it all. So Hank McCoy, he's kind of on the fence. He sees the benefit of maybe getting rid of the mutation, but also the downside to losing it. So he goes to talk to Dr. Rao, who he actually knows. And in the process of talking to her, it's kind of, things sound a little suspicious. And as there's more digging by the X-Men, they find out that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes on how this cure was found, and the nature as to the testing and stuff that went on behind the scenes. And there's actually a fiendish character that's kind of backing the whole project, and they eventually have to face off against this person and kind of set things right to those to the wrongs that Dr. Rao kind of perpetrated in coming up with this cure. So very cool story, standard comic book fare, and I liked it better than Extremis and Wolverine Origin, but not as much as Eternals. Eternals was still my favorite, but this one was really good as well. So next up, got back at the Alien series, Alien 3. Was it 3 times the terror, 3 times the something, and 3 times the something else? This was a good movie, not as good as the first two, but good. It picks up not long after Aliens, when Ripley, Hicks, Newt, and Bishop have been went through their ordeal in Aliens and are in cryosleep and are traveling back towards Earth. Unfortunately, though, the Sulaco, the ship that they're on, it has a fire, and so they are jettisoned in an escape pod while in cryosleep and crash land on it's a planet that houses a foundry that's actually doubles as a penal colony. It's called Furiosa 161, nicknamed Fury. The foundry where this prison is, it's kind of on a skeleton crew now. It was decommissioned a long time ago, but a small number of the men that were still there wanted to stay behind because they didn't want to go back into the regular world or wherever they were headed next. And so it was agreed upon that they would just maintain a skeleton crew and live there and keep the foundry operational if it's needed in the future, sort of thing. So there's this small contingent of men there, mostly all criminals except the 2 or 3 wardens that work there. And so naturally, Ripley, a young female crash landing on the planet, could cause some complications, let's say, to a fiendish all-male cast. So she's rescued from the crash, but unfortunately both Hicks and Newt perished, and Bishop the android is like almost totally destroyed. So she's literally the only survivor, and after waking up, she forms something of a bond with the medic Clemens that helps treat her, and she starts inquiring as to, well, why did we crash land? What happened? I want to see the bodies. So they go and take Newt's body out of the at the morgue, out of the deep freeze at the morgue, and Ripley's like, do an autopsy on her, because she's positive that they were jettisoned from the ship because of an alien, but the autopsy shows Newt's insides as being completely normal. So Ripley's like, oh, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe it really was just an electrical fire. Little do we know that a facehugger actually did cause the crash and has impregnated one of the inmates' dogs with a little baby alien inside the dog. Eventually, of course, it hatches, and little accidents start happening to some of the inmates here and there. So once that starts happening, Ripley again starts to get a little suspicious. So then she goes out into the bad weather to the scrap heap and brings back into the foundry what's left of Bishop and hooks him up to a computer and has him kind of go over the logs of the Sulaco and question him as to, was there an alien on board our our escape pod. Is that what caused this problem? And he confirms that yes, there was an actual queen alien facehugger aboard that craft. So Ripley lays out the truth to the guys. They're disbelieving at first, but the more and more things spiral into disaster, the more they start to believe her, and they come up with kind of a last-ditch plan to herd the alien to a certain part of the foundry and then destroy it using the foundry's equipment. So, but of course, knowing the Alien franchise, there's going to be many complications, let's say, along the way, leading in a high body count and a very suspenseful conclusion. So, again, not as good as the first two, but way better than most other movies. So, can't complain about the Aliens franchise. We're going to finish up here with a couple of video games. First up, one of the games my cousins loaned me a while back, Batman, the Telltale series. So just like the Guardians of the Galaxy game I played a while back, the Minecraft story mode ones, these Telltale games, The Wolf Among Us that I most recently finished playing, these Telltale games are not action games. It's a storyline and you react to the action using your controller with the odd action sequence, but mostly pressing a button to have your character respond to other people with the answer that you prefer. So, and depending on your choices in the game, the story evolves and changes based on your choices. So the story in this game is that in Gotham, Harvey Dent is running for mayor against the incumbent, who is Quincy Sharp. Is that who it is? I think that's who it is. I'm getting all my Batmans confused anymore. And Bruce Wayne has thrown his full backing and a lot of his funds behind Harvey Dent because they're good friends, and Bruce believes in Harvey's vision for Gotham and cleaning everything up and all the stuff he believes in. So soon enough, though, there's a coming complication that Bruce gets wind of. An old childhood friend named Oswald Cobblepot comes back to Gotham, but the guy, he may have been a childhood friend, but now he's more of just a thug, and you may know him as the Penguin otherwise. And so he comes and meets with Bruce and says, Bruce, there's a revolution coming to Gotham, and I'm part of it. And so after this meeting, things do start to happen. Bruce's parents, especially his father, are kind of outed as being bullies, and that he was aligned with a certain crime boss named Carmine Falcone, strong-armed people, murdered people, and Bruce can't believe it at first, but the more and more evidence that comes up, he has to start giving it some credence. But at the same time, he wants people to know that, you know, my father was my father. He died when I was, 7 or 8 years old, or whatever he was. Like, who I am right now has nothing to do with him, but people feel that the vast fortune in Bruce's company that he's sitting on was all gained by Thomas Wayne's dirty money, right? So in the end, Oswald takes over Wayne Enterprises. The Children of Arkham is this militant group that starts coming into Gotham and performing all sorts of atrocities, and there's lots of wild cards in the mix: Vicky Vale, Catwoman, and all sorts of other ones as well. So you have to navigate this this web of mystery and deceit, and help Batman come out the victor against these foes. And at one point during the game, in maybe the 4th episode near the end, you actually get placed in Arkham Asylum and meet a young man with green hair who goes by the name of John Doe. So Batman and the Joker don't quite know each other yet in this game, so it's interesting to see their first meeting with each other when they're not arch enemies. So very cool game, very interesting story, and we get to see Catwoman with her pants off, and there's lots of violence, so it's win-win, right? Last up, I don't have a case for this because it is a virtual download I've had on my Wii for many years now. This game brings to a close my son and I's recent Mega Man quest. We had gone through all the games, starting with 11 and going back from the beginning. And so this game that we recently completed was Mega Man 10. The story behind Mega Man 10 is that this virus called Roboenza has struck the metropolis and taken down all sorts of robots in this in a dilapidated, sick kind of state. And of course, all these humans depend on the robots to do all their menial tasks, and so it's caused all sorts of chaos. And eventually, after a month, some of these robots start turning violent, and so things escalate even further. And what's worse for Mega Man is that his sister Roll has also contracted the disease. So one day, Dr. Wily comes out and says to Dr. Light and Mega Man that, I was working on this machine to synthesize a cure for Robo-Enza, but one of these robots stole it. So, naively, the two believe him, and so Mega Man sets off to get this machine back and save the day. And, of course, we know Dr. Wily's lying, but we go off and we save the day anyways. So, in this game, it's the standard formula. You defeat 8 robot masters in their different worlds, and then you go to Wily's castle, and you face down not 4 stages this time, which is the usual, but 5. So at the first 4, and then you go up high on the castle and face Wily and just his transporting, disappearing pod. Usually that's the same part of the last boss fight, but this one they separated into a 5th kind of stage in the castle. So the robot masters in this game, let me see if I can remember them, are Combat Man, Blade Man, Strike Man, Solar Man, Chill Man, Pump Man, Nitro Man, and best of all, Sheep Man. So you face down the 8 robot masters, and of course it's the same thing as usual. Once you beat them, you gain their weapon. That weapon works really well on a certain other mystery boss. So it's the trick is figuring out whose weapon to get first, and then whose it works on, and so on down the line in a domino effect. And so if you can beat the 8 robot masters, you move on to the castle, face the 5 stages there. There's some new bosses in the first few stages of the castle, but then of course the last stage or 2, you face the boss rush, where you defeat all 8 bosses again, and then Dr. Wily in his whatever skull machine he's operating in the game, and then eventually in his disappearing little pod that he flies. So this game was, there's not much to say about a Mega Man game that I haven't already said. When they first came on the scene back in the late 80s, they were revolutionary at the time, and what I like about this is that they didn't change things all that much. They added some new features here and there over the series, like they gave Mega Man the ability to slide in a bunch of games, and they took it away for Mega Man 10. And some of the games in the later on in the series, you could collect bolts and then buy upgrades with them. So they introduced some new concepts over time, which is nice because you want to keep it somewhat fresh and a little bit different each time, but they didn't outright change it in a crazy manner and ruin the series. I'm a big believer in, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you want to tweak things a little bit, like I said, great, but don't mess with a good thing. So Mega Man and Capcom have followed that advice, and I applaud them for it. So that is everything for now. I got 2 more piles, so Monday, Tuesday, and I should be done by then, so we will see you next time.